Lords of Iron. The greatest survivors in the galaxy. The most competent Marines in Warhammer. From the Board Library. The Anvil of the Smithy. The place. Beta Garmin 4. The time. The Horus Heresy. The Age of Darkness. Through half-mooned eyes, Tarax Antarax watched the contempted dreadnought stance and swing. The venerable entombed warrior had smashed one of his honor guard with its Gravis power fist, impaled another with its massive chain fist. Fountains of blood erupted from its victim as he was carved in two. But in that extended downward swing to accomplish this messy execution, the dreadnought had a few microseconds of dead time, and Tarax Antarax, the cudgel, struck. He took 2 steps forward past the last of his guards, his servo appendage coming up to pin the right arm of the dreadnought, and he swung his graviton crusher into the chest of the dreadnought. Not as dramatic or explosive as a thunderhammer, it barely dented the front plate, but tendrils of power arced from the collision, running up and down the dreadnought, fusing its systems, stunning its occupant. Tarax Antarax then underhand lobbed a small device into the helmet crevice of the mechanical monstrosity. It lodged between the mantle and the fake helmet. Tarax's servo arm pushed the dreadnought back, and as it stumbled, the bomb detonated. The melter explosion was forced down into the main chassis of the beast and annihilated the crippled marine pilot within, along with the top half of the contempted dreadnought. It fell backwards, both pilot and walker never to fight another battle. Tarax Antarax now walked over its lifeless form to prove the point to the now wavering blood angels who had surged out to complicate his attack. Antarax's honor guard surgically took the heads off 5 of the enemy, and this made them break. Not out of fear, never that. These were sons of Sanguinius, but out of sheer failure. They could do no more here. Their gambit had failed with the destruction of their leader, the contempted dreadnought. They retreated in good order, but they retreated. 100 computations went through the helmet of the Warsmith. He perpetually barked clipped orders to the units under his command. Some might describe a battle like a ballet, but to the Warsmith, it was just a butcher's block, an exercise in applied force and expedient execution. Tactical squads 3 through 5 were sent against the higher outcrops on the left. They would not break the defenses, but would buy 895 seconds where the elevated enemy marines would have to concentrate their fire down on them, alleviating pressure from the central push. Tarax ordered a quintet of Xiphon interceptors to strafe the parapets of the right flank defenders, keeping their heads down for what he calculated as 213 seconds, possibly losing 2 of the interceptors to return las cannon fire. That raised area would then have jump assault squads 7 through 11 descend on them and neutralize the heavy weapon squads there. Tarax calculated that the affray would cost him up to 62% of his assault squads. This was acceptable. With all this in place, the Spartan assault vehicles were ordered forward. Their flare shields would absorb the fire coming into their front. Now that the defenders in the wings were busy, their probability of making it to the walls was elevated by 45.85%. From his position stood atop the carcass of the dreadnought, the Warsmith watched his maneuvers play out. Oh, there were a constant stream of other minor orders. Elevate the Medusa fire 22 degrees to strike at the enemy behind the walls. The spoiler squads 3, 8, and 11 to disembark and chase the crumbling enemy forces back into the hidden sally port, to take it and proceed inside the facility. The heavy support squad 2 and 4 to concentrate their crack missile fire on auto-defense turrets above the main gates, and a score of other nudges and adjustments. Each directive traded fire for position, men for meters. Then the Spartans struck. The tactical dreadnought squads within charged down the front ramps and straight into the lines of Blood Angels. Within a mere minute, the Terminators walked over a carpet of broken red warplate, then into the base proper. This was the third such hard point Tarax Antarax had taken in so many days. The Loyalists were brave. They were Astartes, Space Marines, but they were also inexperienced in siegecraft, and still hesitated when firing or engaging with fellow Astartes. And those nanoseconds of hesitation counted. It was as though they still could not believe they were fighting their own, even now. A backwater of the Beta Garment campaign, but one Tarax Antarax had made his own. His Primarch, Perturabo, had given him scant reinforcements or support for the laundry list of targets he had been given. Yet Tarax would do it. No complaints, no excuses. For he was iron. Iron within, iron without. Who are the Warsmiths, and how can the Imperium of Man survive their dark machinations? Welcome, gentle listener, I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and faces of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. Before we head on to the lore proper, do hit the links in the video description or pinned comment to gain the Baldermort character minis line. Due to popular demand, Major Kill has extended the sale for one more week only, so go get them if you want them. And look at the size of Cronin and Tiddles. Not to be sniffed at, gents, not to be missed. But let's get on with it. And today, we shall be investigating some of what I believe to be the most stoic, directed, disciplined, and able Space Marines of all time. Now before you say me nay or bray at my presumption, there are many details that back this declaration if one has the eyes or wit to see. It is often thought that the most exceptional officers in the legions came from the usual and much-lauded suspects. The Imperial Fists, known for their indefatigable resilience and stoicism under the most dreadful of circumstances. The Ultramarines, whose tactical acumen and logic was second to none, winning them many a large engagement that others would struggle with at the bare minimum. The leaders of the Fighting First, the Dark Angels, adaptable and brilliant, their very gene seed lent to an almost intrinsic knowledge of how to defeat near any foe. And of course, the Sons of Horus, the legion whose Primarch was found first, trained for longest by the Emperor of Mankind himself, and who had a vested interest in the excellence of his warriors, as each and every one of their deeds reflected on his own grandeur. Yet, amongst one legion, there was an environment so brutal, so rigid, so goal-oriented, and unforgiving, that its officers had to be the best. These, as one might presume from the title of this entry, were the Iron Warriors. I shall explain my perspective. Perturabo was ever a bitter and callous soul, but he was also an unrelenting force of nature, and the warriors of his legion were to perform to his expectations or face the repercussions. Now some believe that Perturabo annihilated his officers as swiftly as Darth Vader, with very little cause except his foul temper. Yet this is not exactly the situation. Well, not for the vast majority of the time. Perturabo was seen as a cold machine, who used logistics as adroitly as Guilliman, as I have related before. I believe the Lord of Iron is far more a mirror image of the Avenging Sun than the Praetorian of Terror, Rogel Dawn. That the Iron Warriors and Imperial Fists were tasked to the opposite ends of the siege paradigm is more a circumstance and duty than a revelation of intrinsic strengths or similarities in my mind. Yet, as a guide, I never claim authority over any nuance or supposition. So, if you disagree, then politely make your case in the comments section. But I digress. To me, Guilliman epitomized the tallyman, harboring his flock, winning battles by protecting his forces, and making sure that when he sacrificed his beloved sons, it was for an overwhelmingly important target or goal, winning wars by making certain he was fielding the larger force due to this caution and preservation. He would never send his troops into battle without the right training, equipment, and support required to perform any task given them. Rebute also created a supply and recruitment chain second to none. Hence, by also defending his numbers, growing them perpetually at a rate no other legion could match, he soon outnumbered even the First Legion, the Dark Angels. Now, the Rangdan Xenocides are a factor in how the First were reduced to a level where they could be surpassed at all, even by the Ultramarines, but that is definitely a story for another day. Now, I said every other legion, but there is always an exception that proves the rule. In this case, it was the Iron Warriors. The shadow of Guilliman's light, the Iron Warriors had a recruitment pattern and chain so well established and so finely tuned, so effective, that it supported the ghoulish methodology applied by the Lord of Iron, Perturabo. And of all gene seed, those of the Ultramarines and Iron Warriors were demonstrably the most easily accepted by aspirants and or neophytes. Hence, in a negative way, this may have lent to the perspective that these Marines were all too replaceable. Perturabo was a logistician every bit as good as Guilliman in my mind. Yet he spent the lives of his warriors like water. Note, I did not say his sons. For Perturabo never took to his legion, did not lead them like a paragon, a father. He was a cruel taskmaster, who treated them like automata or servitors, to be expended in X numbers to gain Y result. Had he protected his men instead of expending them, there is no doubt that his legion would have been every bit as numerous as the Ultramarines. It is also a raw fact that there were so many Iron Warriors deposited around the galaxy on garrison or extended siege duties, those men who were probably not even informed of the Istvan Dropsite massacre and the turn of their lord. So, when Perturabo brought much of his strength to bear on the loyalists in Horus's push towards Terra, even still, the Iron Warriors outnumbered most other traitor legions. But why do I make these points in such detail? Just imagine serving such a master, such a villain, even before his treachery in siding with Horus Lupercal. Although most of his officers were not executed, giving apologies like Captain Nidar, he ground them down. When they could no longer perform at any task he set them to, no matter how mismatched, they became expendable to their Primarch. Some were sent to lead Forlorn Hopes, the first wave in a siege assault. Others were sent to the furthest reaches of the galaxy on pitiful missions of boredom and ignominy. The most dramatic and highly publicized failures would be punished with exile. Yet, there was indeed one scenario where the Lord of Iron, the Primarch Perturabo, would raise his weapon and deal out a fatal beating, when an officer attempted to give an excuse. Failure was failure, but not always unredeemable nor terminal. But any man, woman or child, Astartes especially, who looked him in the eye and attempted to pass off their inadequacies, to offer excuses. This resulted in execution. Now one might think this would breed a supine lethargy and reluctance in accepting any position amongst his men. Yet, the gene seed of the Primarch ran through the very veins of his sons, accepted or not. They would become iron. Iron within, iron without. To serve such a master and not only survive but rise in rank and responsibility is no mean feat. To do so to the extent that they still live, even after the horrific attrition of the Horus Heresy, the Siege of Terra, and the subsequent scouring, one can only imagine how vengeful and spiteful the Primarch became when he saw his dreams in tatters and had to live with the never-ending reminder that he was beaten by Rogel Dawn, no less. Oh, he could tell himself that it was the ineptitude of his brother Primarchs, that perhaps if Horus had backed him and not made him leave, then he may have won out and brought down the Palace of Holy Terror, and walked up the stairs of the Golden Throne, and slaughtered Rogel Dawn on his way to helping Horus exterminate their father, the Emperor of Mankind. Despite Perturabo being accused of being petulant, uncaring, and even ignorant of his own flaws, it would be a far greater phantasm and lie that he would not truly know and feel the sting of the truth. For he was beaten by Rogel Dawn, then spurned by his closest brother, Horus. He lived in shame. The Primarch who had ordered the decimation of his legion on the first day they met, the man who squeezed the life out of his own adopted sister and swept the world of his youth of most life. How would such a monster treat his underlings with that level of turmoil and shame, self-hatred and spite, an ever-present unavoidable reality every single day? Just imagine how daintily one might want to tread around such a tyrant. Yet, to walk on eggshells would be the most direct route to invoking his deadly ire. Thus, every Warsmith of the Legion of rank enough to be in close proximity to the Primarch would have to prove every day in every action that they were more use alive than as a balm for his burning soul. Discipline, precision, bravery, excellence. Now some might balk at the word bravery, yet to be a Lord of the Iron Warriors, to be a Warsmith, even in the fullness of their fall to evil, would require just that, and in abundance. For we like to strip all virtue from a being that is construed or outright declared as evil, but this does not denude them of the traits that make them so successful and hence such a threat. Even the enemy can be brave, even the monster can be stoic, stolid, perceptive, or patient. It is often the remaining virtues of the fallen that make them such a threat. Alas, one can only look to the Emperor's children to see how the fall destroyed them more than any others of the traitor legions. So, when one is in the presence of, or facing off against, a Warsmith of the Iron Warriors, make no mistake, they will be called calculating and indefatigable. They will be utterly without hesitation or fear, because there is little that the enemy can do that has not already been an ever-present danger from rising in the morning to reclining at night. What could truly induce fear after dealing with a demon Primarch as wretched as Perturabo? But far worse for everyone and everything getting in the way of the Iron Warriors is the newest endeavour. They now have a goal, a golden task for them to forge, a unified dream for them. For everyone else, a nightmare. And that is a thing that can fire the hearts of even the traitor Astartes. For the Lords of Iron will follow their Primarch anywhere now, but most especially in the horror I shall describe later in this dissection of the subject, something not to be missed. So, after all of the explanation, what exactly is a Warsmith? When the legions went out on the Great Crusade, their guiding light that directed their organization, tactics, doctrines, and dispositions was the Principia Bellicosa, the equivalent of the Codex Astartes, yet it was written by the Emperor himself. As an aside, the Codex Astartes is naught more than the collected wisdom of that age, of course built on the directions of the Principia Bellicosa. Guilliman did not invent the tactics and strategies. He collected, collated, and refined them from battle reports ranging from every legion, every chapter's engagements, and the lessons learned. Why? Because never before had there been such an army as the Legio Astartes. Never before had so much power, skill, and experience been brought to bear in the one army of fighting men. The old and accepted rules of warfare simply did not apply when dealing with warriors who could outfight, fire, and work near anything they encountered. Hence, do not look to just Rebute for the wisdom of the Codex, for it is built on the brilliance and ages-long experience of the immortal Emperor of Mankind, the human being who had witnessed every age of warfare, from the first battles fought in the sands of the Middle East, all the way to the indescribable slaughter of the cybernetic revolt. He had seen it all. So when some discuss the crusade and how it progressed so swiftly, they often forget the astonishing wealth and pedigree of knowledge brought to the training and equipping of the armies of the Emperor. Yet, even so, each of the legions was different, sometimes in dramatic ways, as with the Trifoil legions, but each was definitely distinctive. Able to wage war as described in the Bellicosa, of course, but ready for their ultimate expression of specialization. When a Primarch was returned to his legion, it often transformed. Mostly this was to the better, as a Primarch's temperament and abilities were reflected in his gene sons. Hence, he would be the paragon that would unlock and unleash the fullest potential of his sons. But, in the case of some legions, it went badly. When Perturabo was found by the Great Crusade on Olympia and sent to study with the Emperor, he looked upon all of the records of the battles of his legion, and he found them wanting. Decimated them. 1 in 10 of his men was executed by the remaining 9. Oh, there was outcry at such a repulsive action towards Astartes. Guilliman and others attempted to censure Perturabo for this horror, yet the Emperor did nothing. At that time, he either knew the horror to come, as some say, and let Perturabo begin the path that would take him to the Siege of Terror. Others merely state that the Emperor trusted his Primarch sons to do what they knew was best for their legions. Hence, the very first order of the Lord of Iron was his harshest. He never decimated again, but he had made his point. He would not be challenged. He would not give succor and guide his legion like sons. He would break them to his will and use them as his fists. As with near every other Primarch, he then set about changing his legion to match the requirements for his method of war. Hence was the rank of Warsmith granted by Perturabo, a signal of honor and an elevation that was rare and had to be earned in absolute obedience and phenomenal success. It soon replaced the standard rank of Praetor in many segments of his legion. A Warsmith was a genius of warfare, a savant, as they are so often called in the setting vernacular, taking command of many companies, usually equating to approximately 10, so putting it onto a footing with what we now call a chaptermaster. These formations would not be called chapters in the Iron Warriors, but grand battalions. Now this is not uncommon in the legions, for there were many ranks and titles to be divvied out. This was because the legions were so large, so complex, had so many different wings and specialities due to the incredible weaponry of war at their disposal. Their tank columns would make a guard regiment stand back in awe. Their armor, flyers, support batteries were the like that will never be seen again. So few now know how to create these gargantuan weapons of war, let alone in numbers enough to maintain them. Yet the issue with the Warsmith was that it was a truly nebulous thing, more a title than rank to many. Hence, when Warsmiths and Praetors, captains and the like all gathered, all too often the chain of command was confused if the Lord of Iron himself was not present to dictate seniority through his attention and good graces to one or other of his officers, and the nuance left uncertainty that created competition, perceived slights, and rancor. Perhaps this was the goal of the Primarch, to keep all beneath him unable to truly organize with certainty in his absence. Perhaps he wanted them to keep each other at peak performance, for rivalries in that era were defined by an attempt to outperform each other. In any case, the heart of the legion that was once so proud had twisted into an arena of Darwinian competition that would make a Klingon wilt. Where most legions had unquestioned camaraderie and loyalty to one another, the Iron Warriors were an exhibition in cutthroat corporate achievement. It was not a warrior fraternity. It was an uncaring, unwelcoming, unrelenting war machine. Nothing more. Of course, like most Primarchs, Perturabo would draw up an inner concilium from his top officers, and these were the Triarchs. 3 unstoppable and unflinching Warsmiths would be given this title, Triarch. They represented the three prongs of the trident of Olympia, the world Perturabo was hurled onto by the powers of chaos. Yet, even then, the Primarch did not pay them the heed that Horus gave to his Mournival, and they would often be used as little more than heralds of his will, a buffer between him and the rank-and-file officers of his legion. For Perturabo did not interact with them any more than absolutely necessary. After all, why bother talking to carven lumps of wood on a chessboard? It is still astonishing to me that he made it through to the siege. His own men did not detest him like some. They feared him, but in some strange way, many of them adored him. One will presume it is because it is often the abused and neglected child that hungers for the parents' approval most of all. We should have a brief segment on their war gear. Due to their rank, a Warsmith is kitted out with the best armor possible. Most would be in Cataphractii tactical dreadnought armor, the heaviest Terminator warplate until the advent of the Saturnine suit. Let's not dwell on those. At a bare minimum, they would have artificer armor and the protective energy shield known as an Iron Halo. Now, although all Warpsmiths are not Warsmiths, and not all Warsmiths are Warpsmiths, every Warsmith was still deeply knowledgeable about the intricacies of technology, automata, dreadnoughts, and vehicles. Thus, they would have a Cortex controller to permit them to command phalanxes of battle automata if they were available, and a servo arm to assist them in field repairs, what was then called battlesmithing. Yes, these Lords of Iron could fix near anything, just as their father could, and they did this while under heavy enemy fire if need be. Yet, the servo arm could also be used as a potent bludgeon to crush any attackers. Now, the distinct weapons of the Iron Warriors were many. The shrapnel bolter round was one such, but the most iconic of their arsenal is probably the Graviton Crusher. A two-handed power mallet-like weapon, but not a thunderhammer. The thunderhammer was far more effective against Terminators and other Marines, but the Graviton Crusher was designed to discharge a haywire field into anything it struck. The field would course through the systems of a vehicle, dreadnought or battle automata, and basically fry them, leaving it helpless. And of course, the obligatory melter bombs that so many in the legions carried in those days, perfect for destroying stunned dreadnoughts or vehicles, or opening holes in fortifications. But that was then, in the Age of Darkness. What about now? The era Indomitus. Do they still exist? Well, that is a resounding yes. Some say that the Iron Warriors are so numerous and potent in the grim darkness of the far future for a few key reasons. When Perturabo retreated from the Siege of Terra, he did so in good order and without the vengeful loyalists on his heels. When he left, the Blood Angels, White Scars, and Imperial Fists were still rebuffing the traitors from the very walls of the Imperial Palace on Terra. So, he got off scot-free, one might say. When the Dark Angels and Ultramarines came to break the siege further, when Horus had already been slain, the traitor legions were rudderless and fled from the Sol system like hyenas. The Loyalist legions then set about the utter destruction of the traitors, chasing them all the way to the Eye of Terror. Of course, there was one major hiccup awaiting these forces, the Iron Cage, where Perturabo threw down the gauntlet to Rogel Dawn and his Imperial Fists, where the flower of the 7th Legion remaining were annihilated. An event so terrible for the Sons of Dawn that the 13th had to come to their rescue, a kindness that perhaps will never be truly forgiven, another detail for another day. Yet, even the Iron Warriors eventually fled into the Eye of Terror. Yet Perturabo did not go into meditation in a tower, as Lorgar did. He did not engage entirely in the great game, as far as we can see, as Mortarion, Fulgrim, and Angron did, when they embraced apotheosis. Although the details are brief and mostly obscured, Perturabo did indeed become a demon Primarch, but there is strong evidence that he maintained at least half a hand on the reins of his armies. As such, the Iron Warriors, more than near any other legion, have maintained some semblance of a martial order, have stayed being his legion. Yes, There are many war bands now. Yes, some have gone rogue, it seems. But one can only wonder if this was in fact not at the order of their distant cold progenitor. The rank of Warsmith is still the most important in all of the Iron Warriors, and its holders are possibly the most dangerous traitor marines in all of the galaxy. They hold to the cold, calculating methodology of their legion, and they maintain iron order amongst their forces. For the Death Guard are fully given over to Nurgle and more a family, were the sons of Fulgrim a dilettantes of battle, roving and reaving hedonists attempting to find their Primarch, where so many others of the once glorious legions are nothing more than vagabond hordes of horror. The Iron Warriors remain the closest thing to a legion as one can possibly imagine for men who have fallen so far. But it gets far worse for the Imperium, for unlike the other factions of Chaos Marines, they have a well-defined plan. The coming horror, the Infinite Citadel. The Lord of Iron, Perturabo, finally pushed into real space just recently. Yet he does not emulate the usual pattern of the raiders from the Eye. He is not Abaddon. The trajectory is utterly in counterbalance to the rush of the Despoiler and his Black Crusade. If the Imperium can fend off Abaddon, if they can somehow break his assault, if they can send him packing, which is no small task, Abaddon is not the man he was. He is not the vainglorious raging first captain, not for a long time now. So many people underestimate him. He has forged a legion beyond compare, a force far more deadly than even his father's. He has browbeat, coerced, cajoled, and convinced most of the demon primarchs, many a demon prince, and the four gods themselves to lend their strength to his war. To borrow a title from another realm, unquestionably, he, Abaddon the Despoiler, is the ever-chosen. But even if the entire Imperium, the two loyalist Primarchs and any who join them subsequently, can defeat Abaddon, then what do they face? Horror. Unrelenting, unavoidable horror. For the Lord of Iron, Perturabo, is not rushing towards terror. He is hitting, holding, and fortifying. He is constructing the Infinite Citadel. When the Horus Heresy lost its impetus and fled from Terra, they were chased across the stars, right into the Eye of Terror. The Scouring may have 1,000,000 battles, 100 campaigns in miniature, but we know it was comparatively swift. But this? The Imperium will have to siege every world taken by the Lord of Iron. While Abaddon advances, his rear is being fortified beyond compare. For anyone who knows how to siege a world, knows even better how to defend one. The reality is this, that anything that remains of the Imperium after defeating Abaddon may not be able to justify the eye-watering casualties that will have to be paid to take even one world. The Lord of Iron will know when to sally out, when to bunker, and when to start a full fresh assault against the realms of men. He is near the equal of the Praetorian of Terra. Perhaps his thousands of years as a demon have only added to his gifts. If so, no force, even one led by the 7th, the Imperial Fists, will be able to confidently bring down his ramparts unless at catastrophic cost. A cost the Imperium will simply not be able to pay. Because every front and near every world of the Infinite Citadel will be held by a Warsmith. So, even if Abaddon the Despoiler's final Black Crusade is defeated, what hope does mankind truly have? There is but one light, one man who might avert this disaster, but he is reported dead. Yet, the truth of the matter is unavoidable. Unless Rogel comes back, unless Dawn returns, the Imperium is finished. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to have a look at the Baldermort minis before you go. Links in the video description. And if you like this video, then have a look at the Triumvirate of Terror storyline. It's ongoing, and I am told some of my best work. Enjoy. And I'll also put in a link to the grim dark narrator. He's had an awful time recently, had his entire channel taken from him. So go have a look at his new offerings. He's doing exceptional work, breaking down some of the stories contained in the Black Library. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.